This is my 15.2 sports injury screencast. In this screencast, I'll be talking about the physiological response to injury, the psychological responses to injury, and then from that knowledge, I'll use it to apply it to two case studies. So for physiological responses to sports injuries, we can have two types, strains and sprains. First one is strains. As you can see on the screen in the left hand side, the muscle's quite enlarged and it's quite at the top, it's quite red and inflamed. So strains are normally either a twist, pull, or a tear to a muscle or tendon, and so the tear would be the muscle detachment and it would be a rupture. So you have three grades, grade 1, 2, 3. For the grade 1, it would be a muscle pull, and there would be about less than 10% muscle fibre damage. You'd still be able to carry on. So if you were, for example, in football, if you got over, didn't warm up properly, and ended up straining and pulling your muscle, you'd have a bit of slight discomfort for 3 minutes. You just kind of run it off and you can be able to carry on. So again, it's a little bit painful, but your range of motion's fine. You can still move about. There would probably be slight swelling if it was a bad muscle pull, if it was on like the worst end of the scale, because like for hamstring, that's quite a big muscle group. So when you pull it, it is quite painful. And then grade 2 is a muscle tear. So there's a little actual tear in the muscle fibre, so that'd be about 10 to 15% damage. Obviously there'd be more swelling, more inflammation, because you kind of ripped the muscle a little bit, and you're immobile because you won't be able to carry on, and you wouldn't really have much stability. You'd have low to moderate stability because it'd be quite painful to walk on, like in football. If you someone slid into you and ended up like studding you and tore your muscle a little bit, it would be quite painful to continue on. So you wouldn't really be able to stand on it, but you'd probably have to like hop. And then grade 3 is an actual rupture, so the muscle has actually detached. So this would obviously be 50% to 100% muscle fibre damage. You'd be in a lot of pain, a lot of swelling, no range of motion, no stability, because your muscles come away from the tendon. So yeah, there would be you wouldn't be able to stand it. That'd be quite a severe injury. The next one is sprains. So that and the strains were caused by overstretching. So just like overstretching the muscle could lead to one of those things. Sprains, that's because of that's stretch or tear of a ligament. So you normally get a sprained ankle. So it's basically where a joint is forced beyond range of movement. So this could be from football on an uneven surface. You could go down like a rabbit hole, or it could be bumpy and rocky, and you trip over and you overstretch the ligament, and then that causes a little bit of a pain. So again, there's 3 grades. So grade 1 is just a stretch of ligaments, like just literally down, just running, because sometimes your ankle just goes. So it could just be a case of your ankle just slips over onto the wrong side. So your range of movement still are fine. It'd be painful for a couple of days. You can carry on. You can keep walking. There'd probably be a little bit of swelling if it was really quite like a bad grade 1, and a little bit of inflammation. So yeah, like uneven surfaces. Grade 2 is an overstretch of the ligaments. That's a real overstretch. That's probably down more rabbit hole, or like a big ditch, like a big dip in the uneven surface. So you'd have swelling, inflammation. You'd have low to moderate range of motion, again like the strain, but you wouldn't really be stable. So for example, it'd be basketball. If you're running up and doing a layup and you land on it awkwardly, you've overstretched it, and because of that force, you've caused your muscle to basically you've caused your ligament to basically give way. So like in the photo on the top right hand corner, your ankle could just turn onto its right hand side, and then that forces the ligament to be stretched. So yeah, it would be under more pressure. So it would be an overstretch, a severe overstretch. And then grade 3 is torn ligaments. So that's where you've actually fully torn the ligament, a bit like a strain. There's no stability, no range of motion because you've done some serious damage. There's high swelling, high inflammation because of that damage. And the next one is a hematoma. So as you can see on the right hand side photo, that's more of an intrahematoma because it's quite small, whereas the photo on the left hand side is an interhematoma because it's a lot bigger. And so basically hematoma is just a solid swelling of clotted blood within the tissues caused by a collection outside blood vessels. So an intra, the blood's normally contained within muscle fibers, so it doesn't seep out into the surrounding tissues. So this could be in sport like boxing. If you just get a punch to the head, it's just going to come up in a big bruise on your head and a big lump, but it's not really going to affect your skull's probably going to protect it a bit more, so it's just going to affect that area. So it's not going to go all down your face and you're not going to have a red face. Whereas an interhematoma is where bleeding is spread out into the surrounding tissues. Like, so for example, on the in like rugby, if you have a knee bash, if someone comes up and studs you on your hamstring, you've got the studs are quite sharp, so this could cause a hematoma, like the one on the left, the photo on the left. It looks like they've had some kind of quad or hamstring injury, and that's just seeped out into all of their upper leg. So that's obviously a hematoma. Interhematoma is where it spreads out into the surrounding tissue. And another example is if you have a heavy weight on a bench press, because it's the bar on the action is such a small surface area, the bar can hit your pectoral, and because there's such a weight and such a force, it basically crushes your pectoral, and then that would cause a hematoma because the blood would just seep out and there's pressure, so it just go all up the arm and all down the stomach and all on the pec. The blood clotting mechanism, there's 4 stages. The first stage is platelets, second stage is clotting factors, third stage is fibrin, and then the stage 4 is other cells. So basically the first stage is where platelets act as a plug. So they fill in, show you some photos. So if you've got these circles, they basically just fill in as a plug, so they just fill in gaps. And then stage 2 is where the clotting factors reinforce these platelets, so they make them stronger, and they make, there's like on the first photo you can see little tiny yellow dots. That's probably the clotting factors because they're small, so they fill in the gaps, so they're reinforcing stability. Stage 3 is fibrin. So fibrin acts as a glue, or more like a web. So that would probably, on the first photo, that would probably be the red stringy things. So that just kind of glues it together so that it holds it and supports it like a glue. And then stage 4 is other cells. These stick onto the web, and then they fill any other gaps, and they bind to the platelets, and they fill and make less roomy and spacey, and that's blood clotting. So we have 3 stages of healing. You've got your inflammation, which is 3 to 5 days. Your repair, which is 2 to 5 weeks, and which is normally 21 days, and remodeling, which is up to 6 months, or for a grade 3 injury, such as a rupture or a broken leg, this could be up to 2 years. So inflammation, you have a bit of swelling and you have a bit of pain of 3 days after the injury. Nutrients can help this process, so like omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and you can take anti-inflammatory medication to reduce the swelling. You can do methods such as the RICE, which is rest, ice, compression, elevation. So resting further reduces injury, prevents irritation to your body. I is ice, so it reduces the swelling, and so does compression. And then elevation drains the swelling. And then you have repair, which is up to 2 to 5 weeks, and remodeling, which is up to 6 months. So psychological responses to injuries, you have 5 stages. The first one is denial. This is like your first initial reaction to an injury, so it's your defense mechanism. So, for example, in football, if you got injured, you kind of just play it off because you don't really want to know that you've been injured, and it would buffer your shock. The second stage is anger. So that's where your pain really emerges, and it's kind of aimed at objects or individuals. So it could, like in football, it could be the ball, so you could throw the ball, or you could resent the person that did it to you, or your manager, you could turn on them or turn on one of your players. And then you kind of become guilty for being angry because you're annoyed it's becoming a problem and you've been caused pain. And the next stage is bargaining, because you're trying to make a deal to basically postpone the inevitable thing of happening, and you feel a bit helpless and weaker, and you're not really defending your own self, so you're kind of convincing yourself it's not serious. So for example, in football, you'd be like, oh, if I strap it up I can play, or if I take this medication it will numb the pain, I won't feel it. But then it goes into the depression stage, so you're sad because you're becoming isolated from the groups. Because if you know you're injured, you know you're going to be out for a while, so that will cause isolation from the group. So you've become suddenly realise, oh, I'll be out for 2 months or 6 months, depending on the grade of the injury. So then it leads to tension and frustration. So it's difficult for you to accept that you're going to be out for that long, because you're going to be away from your mates, you're going to be away from your coach and your manager, your fitness regime, your structure of your life if you're an elite athlete. And then the last stage is acceptance, where you finally become more happier, well, not happier about it, but not happy that you've got injured, but happier that you're beginning your rehabilitation process, because you're finally moving towards an admission, and it's more of a lifestyle adaptation that you're going to have to face. So yeah, it's going into coping with all the emotions. And some athletes will begin to set goals and targets. So for example, you could say, if you've if you've pulled your quad, you could say that you want to be doing resistant band work in 2 months, because you need to be getting close to the strength that you were. So by doing resistance work, it's no weights at all, so it's just low, moderate intensity work, but it's just building that strength up every day. The emotional states of mind, there are 9 of them. So frustration, this can be after a game or during a game, because you're obviously frustrated, you got injured, and then during a game you're in that moment, like, why has it happened to you, kind of thing. And after a game, you're looking back on it, so you're reflecting on, like, maybe you could have done something differently. The next one is isolation, because this could be between the rehabilitation phase, because you're not involved in the team anymore, you're not going to practice or training or fitness, you're not with your friends because you can't go out with them because you've damaged a ligament or whatever. Motivation loss, this could be again the treatment phase, because you're trying to get back to your high ability level that you were, but you might become a bit despondent and you won't really try as hard, because you're kind of like, what's the point, because you feel that it's a bit pointless, you're never going to get back to where you were. The next one is denial.